I'm Jenni Carlson.
I'm Barry Tramel. Welcome to the Jenni and Barry Show.
Oklahoma State has a men's basketball coach. Finally, after nearly 3 weeks, Steve Lutz has been named the Cowboys' new head coach. We don't expect an introductory press conference until a little later in the week. So as we sit here on Tuesday morning, what do we know about Lutz?
Well, we don't know why it took so long to hire Lutz from Western Kentucky. We don't know how he'll do, but we do know how his teams have played and the type of success they've had. We'll talk about all of that.
But before we get into any of that, we want to say to you, subscribe to our show. Just hit that subscribe button. It might not seem like a big deal to you, but it will help us. And ultimately, that will help you. So subscribe today. We also want to say thanks to these sponsors for supporting the Jenni and Barry Show. MidFirst Bank, Next Gen Roofing, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, 988, Oklahoma's Mental Health Lifeline, Two Fellas Movers, the Oklahoma Ford Dealers Association. Drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Ford is the best in Oklahoma. All right, Barry, let's start with the basics. Let's start with Steve Lutz. And what do you think of the hire?
Well, there are things to like and there are things to question. I think the thing that makes Lutz the most attractive to OSU is his Southwest ties. He's got deep Texas roots, and that's always been important to Oklahoma State in a variety of sports, but particularly basketball. Born in San Antonio, raised in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Ranger Junior College as a student, and then goes to Texas Lutheran and Incarnate Word there in San Antonio. Gets into coaching, Incarnate Word, Stephen F. Austin, SMU, lots of Texas roots. Of course, sort of got his real chops at Creighton with Greg McDermott, and then at Purdue with Matt Painter, and finally gets the head coaching job at a pretty advanced age, 48 or 49 years old, at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. So lots of Texas roots, branched out to get some great pedigree with well-regarded head coaches. But you've got to like a guy coaching at OSU to know his way south of the Red River.
I don't know if I like you saying advanced age is 48, by the way. I'm a little hurt by that comment.
I apologize. As soon as I said it, I thought, what have I done?
But for a head coach, yes, getting your first head coaching job in your late 40s doesn't usually happen like that. We'll maybe talk about more of that in a second. But, I think even though he is sort of a late arriver in the head coaching ranks, he's been 3 years, 2 places, Texas A&M Corpus Christi for 2 years, and then Western Kentucky for a year. Barry, he won the conference each of his 3 years at those places. Not necessarily regular season, won the conference tournament, got to the NCAA tournament. He won in places that, he had to go in and do some things to get going right away. So the fact that as a head coach, he's had success, to me, that's important. I did a checklist when Oklahoma State fired Mike Boynton and said, I don't know who they're going to hire. I left the bracketology of the hire to you, but I said I didn't know who they were going to hire, but I thought that there were some things that needed to be on their checklist. And one of those things was success as a head coach. And Steve Lutz, while the resume as a head coach is short, he has had success. And it's a reminder that, people can win in a variety of places. Yeah, we know that Oklahoma State, their tradition in men's basketball has taken a hit in recent years. But you look around college basketball and you see San Diego State go to the Final Four a year ago. Florida Atlantic go to the Final Four a year ago. NC State, a team out of the NCAA tournament, is now in the Final Four this year. You can win in a variety of places in a variety of ways. So I think while Oklahoma State, some people may be feeling a little down in terms of how the program is perceived and all those sorts of things, I think Steve Lutz being able to win at 2 programs that you don't think of as being, the highest pedigree programs. They're very much mid-major, low mid-major even in some circles. He's won there. I think that's important for this hire.
Yeah, when you look at his head coaching record, it's interesting. You're right. 3 NCAA tournaments, 3 conference tournament championships.
Yep.
But year 1 in the Southland Conference at A&M Corpus Christi, they go 500. Year 1 at Western Kentucky, they go 500 in the league. So it's not that he's necessarily had a high achieving team. It's not necessarily that he's really produced over the course of 3-4 months. But when it comes to March, he has produced.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. It's clear that he knows how to coach, I think, on the repetitive tournament scale, which college basketball becomes in March. We say that March is all that matters in college basketball. The postseason is what drives this sport. Steve Lutz has produced in the postseason.
Yeah. Well, we haven't had a chance to meet the guy. Like I said, probably late in the week before we get that official press conference and introductory time with Steve Lutz in Stillwater. But what you know of him, whether it's read, heard, all that sort of thing, what about this guy is at the top of your intrigue scale, Barry?
Well, I mean, everybody is talking about his pace of play, right?
Mm-hmm.
Texas A&M Corpus Christi ranked 55th in the nation in pace of play last season. Now, may not sound high to you, but there's 360, I think, something college basketball teams. So we're talking about a guy that's in the upper, 80 percentile of pace of play. Goes to Western Kentucky this year, ranks 3rd in the nation. So one of the fastest moving basketball teams in America. Will that play well in Stillwater? Is that what the 21st century crowd wants? It's what a lot of people say they want. But to me, it's pretty clear that Lutz likes to play fast. And when you think of where he came from, Creighton, maybe. Purdue, not really. So, it's sort of putting his own brand, his own mark on his teams, I think is very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Cowboy fans, if you go and win games, they don't care if you score in the 40s or in the 80s. So style of play, I think it's an interesting aspect. And frankly, in the Big 12, maybe that up-tempo pace can be a separator. Maybe that's a spot where Oklahoma State maybe doesn't have, the established top quality players, at least not at the moment. Maybe that's where they can be different enough to, score those upsets. Because I don't know if anybody's looked around, but the Big 12 is not getting any easier, even with Oklahoma and Texas moving out. Arizona, a great program. Arizona State has had moments. Colorado made the tournament this year, won a first 4 in and then another game. So, this is a league that's going to continue to be difficult. So wins are of the utmost importance. How Steve Lutz's Cowboys perform on the scoreboard is going to be at the end when it strikes 0. If you get in the 90s and you still lose a lot, I'm not sure people are fired up about that. But the style of play question is definitely interesting. And I'll go back to what we were talking about before, Barry, a guy that coached as an assistant in college basketball for nearly 3 decades before he gets a chance to be a head coach or before he becomes a head coach. To me, that's a question that I'm looking forward to diving into with him. Why was the time 3 years ago to become a head coach? I have little doubt that there were probably other moments when he could have struck out and got a job. When you're at Creighton, you're at Purdue, you're at some of those higher level programs. Surely if he wanted to get a coaching job, now it might have been a pretty low level coaching job, he could have got it. But why the delay? Why not become a head coach earlier? Oklahoma hired a football coach a couple years ago who was a longtime assistant. It happens. But I'm just interested sort of the why of that for Steve Lutz. Why wait until you've been an assistant for so long to finally take that step?
Yeah, I got to believe one possibility is that he was waiting on a pretty good job and got to be 48, 49 years old and realized, hey, I better take one.
Yeah.
Texas A&M Corpus Christi has pretty good weather, has a great nickname, the Islanders. But
love it.
Don't really, there's no basketball tradition there. It's low level. You said it, it's not even really mid-major. It's low level, low major. So I think he just, said, hey, let me get back to my roots, the state of Texas, get my foot in the water, and rather than be on a really good staff, Creighton, Purdue, and hope for a good job out of there, maybe become the head coach at Western Kentucky. Out of the Purdue staff, he realized I better go somewhere and win,
Yeah.
and then get the chance. And so he got it at A&M Corpus Christi. They turned that into Western Kentucky, which is a solid mid-major job. Western Kentucky has a very solid basketball pedigree. They know what they're doing in Bowling Green. And then now he's in the Big 12 with a chance to make a lot of money and, perhaps turn around a fairly high-profile program with a lot of tradition. So, I got to believe he just waited. And, we look at mostly football coaches because basketball coaches tend to get a job eventually if they want one. But we look at some coaches, Merv Johnson, the offer of a really good job never came. We look at Mike Gundy's staff. Casey Dunn has been wanting a good job, hadn't come yet. So sometimes it doesn't come, and in basketball, you get more opportunities. And eventually, Steve Lutz said, "You know what? I'll give Corpus a try," and he turned that into Western, and he turned Western into OSU.
Yeah. And when you look at it, that's a pretty good turnaround. 3 years as a head coach, and you're in a Power 5 league, arguably the best basketball league. I know what the Big 12 did in the NCAA tournament this year brings that into question, but still a chance to, go into this really the highest level of college basketball coaching as a head coach. Pretty good return on 3 years as a head coach. But because, he has a fairly short resume as a head coach, what do you feel like for Oklahoma State hiring Steve Lutz? What's the biggest unknown about this guy as he becomes the Cowboy head coach?
Oh, I think it's 100% the portal. He's not been a major power conference head coach. He's been on the other end. When you look at what's happening in college basketball, the new fertile recruiting ground are the mid-majors. You look at what look at the Cowboys this past season. Javon Small is the best player on the team. He came from East Carolina. You look at Alabama in the Final Four. They got guys from Ohio and North Dakota State leading the way. That's the place you go get ball players. And can Steve Lutz do that? He did a nice job coaching in the mid majors. Can he mine the mid majors to bring quality players to Stillwater while also keeping guys content here? A couple of prominent Cowboys have entered the transfer portal. Now there's some speculation that Brandon Garrison wants to stay at OSU. If he stayed with Lutz, that would be a great addition to the roster. Eric Daly Jr. is in the portal. Could he be enticed to stay? Heck, he does a podcast with Ollie Gordon. Why would anybody want to leave that? So, so who knows? But to me, that's the key. Working that portal to your advantage. Keeping your guys out of the portal, bringing new guys in.
Well, and we know there's lots of evidence, the power of the portal for a new coach. I mean, we saw it a year ago with Jerome Tang at K-State. They went from really struggling, scuffling along in the Big 12. They hired Jerome Tang, and suddenly, they make it all the way to the Elite Eight. A great team a year ago that was really powered by the portal. So it can happen. To me, the portal's a big question because of what you just said. But part and parcel with the portal, you've got to look at NIL. And obviously, I don't know what the NIL situation is at Western Kentucky. I assume it's not very robust, maybe something, but I can't imagine it's the kind of money that you see at a Power 5 program like Oklahoma State. That was one of the things that Mike Boynton said, on a couple different occasions was not where it needed to be at Oklahoma State. But what does that mean? Does that mean that they tried to get people interested and there was no interest? Maybe the money's there, but people didn't want to give to a program that was struggling under Mike Boynton. Maybe there's no money there. That's a big question in my mind, is how does Steve Lutz handle NIL? Now, I will say that I think if you're a coach looking to move to a job like Oklahoma State, you would have to have some pretty decent, I don't know if assurances is the right word, Barry, but surely you have to know that NIL is going to be taken care of in some way. You can't win in Power 5 college basketball now without NIL. So if you're Steve Lutz, I'm not sure you take this job unless you know the NIL is at least somewhat, under control. You maybe not have it 100% where you want it, but surely, does anybody take this job unless they know there's some assurances with NIL?
No, and that's where In theory, he would have a plan, right? Before you even know the Oklahoma State job's open, before you even know you want the Oklahoma State job, I think you have to have a plan. And I think when at first contact, I think you need to be able to sell that to Chad Weiberg. Chad Weiberg hit the coaching carousel looking for a coach, and he has to sell Oklahoma State. Whether he's after Danny Sprinkle or Steve Alford or Richard Pitino, whoever he might be after. You got coaches like that will have options, and he's got to sell Oklahoma State to that coach. But that coach has to sell himself to Oklahoma State as well. And here's how I can win in Stillwater. Here's how I can be successful when things have been sort of down for the better part of a decade. And the portal is the answer to those questions these days. So to me, that's the key is, can Steve Lutz work that portal? I don't know the history of Western Kentucky. I don't know in terms of last season's portal or Corpus Christi a couple of years ago. I know that sometimes you can hire a coach and he's got enough contacts, either his previous team or around the region or around the country, and he can bring a roster with him. That's probably going to have to happen in Stillwater. That's just the nature. You don't have to like it, but you have to live with it. That's the way basketball teams are built these days.
Yeah, obviously, as we've talked about Steve Lutz and Oklahoma State, a lot of unknowns. And some of that will start to be a little bit clearer as we get a chance to talk to him later this week. But one thing that is definitely unclear is why this hiring took so long, Barry. When Mike Boynton was fired on, I believe it was March 15th, the prevailing winds that we were hearing and sort of sensing was it was going to be about a 10-day window before they got their hire done. It was not 10 days. It was closer to 3 weeks. So do we have any sense of why this hire took so long for Oklahoma State?
Well, I think there were some contract negotiations. I think coaches, they have agents. They drive hard bargains. For whatever reason, they have the negotiating power. And the Weiberg list was getting a little thin. A lot of the coaches that we had talked about had either withdrawn or had gotten other jobs. Danny Sprinkle, foremost among them, going to Washington. So I think the power lies with the coaches in this. The athletic directors need to figure out how to get it back. So far, they haven't. But I do think there was a lot of financial negotiations going on, and I think there were some logistics in terms of the season's over for Western Kentucky. They make that NCAA tournament, and I think there were some family issues going on with Lutz and in the end of the season. So things aren't in a neatly wrapped with a bow. So it doesn't always go real smoothly. I think the portal has changed the recruiting outlook. We've forever, for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, we've worried about National Signing Day, keeping your class together, those things. The class is the portal. That's what's going on with the portal. So just things like that, I think. So no reason to be too worried about it. No reason to be too, discouraged about it. But I do think that the delay has the potential to bother OSU and affect, because guys are landing in the portal. Guys are making choices at schools, and guys are getting some things done. So time was of the essence. I'm hopeful that Lutz has already hit the ground running. I hope that was the case even before the Monday night announcement.
Right.
But, because securing that roster is paramount.
Yeah. You have to hope that there was some behind the scenes work going on, even as Steve Lutz is unofficial. His hiring is not known to the public, but has sort of, we heard late last week that he was the leading contender, even to the point that it was imminent. It sounded like there were negotiations going on. So yeah, I think that sort of speaks. The fact that leaked out a week ago, and then we had the delay in the official announcement. Yeah, I think that probably does speak to negotiations going on between Oklahoma State and Steve Lutz, maybe related to his contract, maybe related to money for assistants, staff, all those sorts of things, maybe related to money for NIL. I think it was the delay. If you could put into a word why, I'm going to guess money is the one word answer. Now, money for Steve Lutz, money for others, money for NIL, whatever the money was going towards. But I think in the end, that delay was likely due to dollar signs and how Oklahoma State was going to respond to those questions. Obviously, it all worked out because Steve Lutz is the guy. But I think that's probably at the root of why we saw that delay. So now with Steve Lutz becoming official, put yourself in his shoes, Barry. What's at the top of your to-do list as you arrive in Stillwater as you're now the Oklahoma State coach?
Brandon Garrison and Eric Daly. Securing them.
Agree. Yeah.
And now, and maybe your staff. I assume your staff. I assume he has his staff ready to go.
Sure.
Guys who are going to do that, whether they're coming with him from Western, whether they're coming up from Texas ties, wherever the case may be. I assume that one was sort of tied down. But securing the guys you got and then going after the others, that's what you just got to do. And, Cowboys had a really nice recruiting class for Mike Boynton, freshman this season, keeping as many of those guys together, Keller and McBride and Garrison, Daly. That was a pretty good building block.
Yeah.
Put those guys with some veteran transfer portals, whoever might come back, veterans on this team already. Bryce Thompson, whoever it might be. You got yourself a ball team, and so we'll see. That's got to be. But here's the truth about the transfer portal. Here's the truth about Power Conference basketball. There really is no building anymore. It's a new roster every year. Yeah. And so Lutz is expected to win immediately. And if he's not, then that's on him. This long runway to success. Now, I'm not saying you fire a guy after 1 year. I'm not saying you give him a series of 1-year contracts. But the long-term building of program. Coaches no longer build programs. They build teams year to year. That's just the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's very, very much the case around college basketball. It would be interesting, though, and I don't know if they can keep all of those guys that just finished their freshman year. That's a tall order, obviously. Even if you had a good year, even if you had continuity of coaches, you'd be likely to lose some portion of that just because of the nature of the sports right now. But if they can keep Eric Daly and they can keep Brandon Garrison, that's a good starting point. You can. I was going to use the word build, and you just said it's not building, and I agree. It's talent acquisition from year to year, and then see what you can bring together. But if you could have those two guys, those are two guys that if they do go somewhere else, they're going to be sought after. They're going to be desired. They're going to be top players in the portal because they're young and they're talented. And so if you can retain those guys, if you can re-recruit them, they obviously chose OSU once already. If you can convince them to stay, maybe one, maybe both, I think that's a good starting point to go forward with this team because, I don't know what you think, Barry, but I mean, reasonable expectations for OSU basketball. I know a lot of fans, get back to the NCAA tournament. That's, I think, top line what people want to see out of this team this year, with Lutz having done it for 3 consecutive years, 2 different places. I think that's the expectation. Is that reasonable? Is it reasonable to think year one, Steve Lutz, not knowing right now who will even be a part of this team, is that a reasonable expectation? The Cowboys getting to the NCAA tournament?
I think the answer is yes. I think every Power Conference basketball fan should expect their school to make the NCAA tournament. The amount of money they're paying these coaches, the new wave of talent distribution, the portal, that makes success an option. That gives schools an avenue to talent, and that's why we're paying these guys so much money to produce. We're no longer paying them to raise up good young men. That's out of the equation. High school coaches get paid for that, and they get paid about $60,000. And so let's say college basketball coaches, that's About $60,000 of their salary is for raising up good young men. The rest of that's to get to March Madness. So I think if Kansas State can do it, Oklahoma State can do it. Now, the difference is OSU it's the vast majority of its success and its tradition comes from two coaches, Henry Iba and Eddie Sutton. Yeah. Kansas State has had wider success with more coaches than that. Going, Tex Winter, Cotton Fitzsimmons,
Jack Hartman.
Jack Hartman, the list goes on. Yeah. And heck, all the way to, Bruce Weber won a Big 12 title and made an Elite Eight, for crying out loud. So, and they fired him. So it's the standard is high. Yeah. The expectations are high. They ought to be high. You're not making, you're not making six figures. You're making seven. So that's a big difference. So yeah, the guy's got to win. Steve Lutz, my advice to you is win. That's why they hired you. That's what they're paying you to do.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Although, and what you say is right about Iba and Sutton. Clearly, the top two, big separation between them and everybody else. But here's what I will say: a guy like Travis Ford, widely disliked by Oklahoma State people, and really, it became a irreparable relationship. He had to go, but he actually won at a pretty decent clip in Stillwater.
5 NCAA tournaments in 8 years. Think the Cowboys might take that right now?
I mean, I understand why he was let go. I get it. But there has been success with other coaches besides Iba and Sutton. Now, it may not be as much as you would want if you're a diehard OSU basketball fan. It may not be Final Four level. But at this point, getting to the NCAA tournament is, you're right, Barry. It should be the expectation of every Power 5 program because of all of what you said. But I think it's also important to remember that there has been success with other coaches at Oklahoma State. Can Steve Lutz be one of those coaches? I have no idea. But it is possible that you can have success and not be Henry Iba or Eddie Sutton at Oklahoma State. We'll get a chance to meet Steve Lutz later this week. We'll have a lot more coverage then, but that's all the time we've got right now. Remember, subscribe to our show. It really does help us. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a review. You can find our columns, videos, and podcasts at selloutcrowd.com, as well as barrytramel.com and jenni-carlson.com. If you want our content sent straight to your inbox, all you have to do is subscribe to our newsletter. It's free and it's easy. Just go to selloutcrowd.com and sign up today. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.